So hello everyone and welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial where I'm continuing my journey answering the most common questions I get on my S1000D training courses. Now, of course, this is probably the most common question that I get on all of my courses, and that is the one of software. I'm always asked to recommend software. I'm always asked to recommend organizations that can support my customers. So I have over the years developed some checklists that I share with my clients when they are asking me to advise and guide them on selecting software that's best for them. Now, it's really important that we understand that it's not one size fits all. There are different tools out there supporting S1000D, but they all do things very, very slightly differently. And some of them, in my view, do it really well. And some of them, in my view, don't do it so well. So there are things that certain software vendors will do that you would maybe not need for your organization or wouldn't appreciate in your organization. So I'm going to break it down into 4 areas of where I am going to answer this for you. What I want you to certainly take away from this is that S1000D is made possible by the vendors out there that support it. So don't go thinking you can do this on the cheap. Now, I have been into organizations where they have tried to build their own kind of pseudo S1000D system, and it's come back and bitten them, where actually in the longer run it would have just been much easier, much more cost effective to go and buy from a specialist software company that understands S1000D, understands how you want to use it, and can actually deliver you some software that you get running with. Now, the reality is that we're dealing with complex information sets and we're dealing with complex structures, and therefore, ergo, we are putting into a lot of knowledge into, in most cases, we're putting a lot of knowledge into software to try and make our lives easier. So there are, over the years, the software market for S1000D has kind of done this and then done this, with a little bit of acquisition, and that's going on. So, and as we move more now into the wider realms of integrated product support, we have to reassess and relook at the software companies that can and possibly support our integrated product support needs or our S1000D needs. So I'm going to keep checking my notes over here because I want to make sure that I answer this for you as best as I can. Now, I'm not going to give away all of my trade secrets on YouTube for free, but I am going to talk about 4 main areas. I'm going to talk about features and functionality is the kind of first area that I would talk about. Then I'm going to talk about technology and architecture, because this is something that we often forget when it comes to our S1000D or any software adoption or selection process. So we need to be aware of that. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about commercial licensing, support, those kind of things. And then the last thing that I always get asked is, can I make a recommendation about a specific company? Have I got an opinion about specific companies? So I'll talk a little bit to that as well and say kind of the things that I might suggest my customers do. So as I've said, you can't do this without software. The first thing that I will say is put aside budget considerations right now. And I know that's hard for us to do, but if we are purely focused on budget, then we will likely end up with a tool that may not necessarily be the best for our projects, for our organization. So I ask my clients, say, look, let's just put to one side money right now, and then let's just focus on the first area where I would support my customers. And that first one is features and functionality. So have we developed a features and functionality matrix? Do we know exactly what we need and want from our output. So I always say, where are we going, and work backwards. Now, S1000D has some functionality matrices which in my view are now a little bit dated and don't necessarily represent the capabilities of software tools these days, certainly when it comes round to things like interactive IETPs. The IETP vendors, on my training course, we spend a lot of time talking about how this world of interactive manuals has collapsed, and the features and functions that are available. So we need to decide what parts of S1000D we want to support. We need to decide what it is we're actually trying to get to and how we're going to get there, and what kind of functions and features we want to give our customers or our end users, or what are we being contracted to. Because it's important to remember, not all software vendors support all components that are available to us in S1000D. For example, the process data module, the ability for us to create process data modules and include those in our IETPs are not supported by all vendors. The CIRs are not supported by all vendors. So we need to be sure, if we're going to be using that capability, how do we make sure and put that into our features and functionality matrix? Are we trying to go to a specific hardware piece of equipment? Now, this is always dangerous. I always say to my clients, you shouldn't be doing that. But some clients say, no, we are going to iPad minis. We are going to iPad Pros. We're going to Android devices. We're going out to the web. We need to be flexible. S1000D by its very nature is and can be flexible. So if we do fall out, or we decide that a certain piece of software doesn't work for us, we should in theory be able to just take it somewhere else and go put it somewhere else. And and I've seen that. I've seen organizations where they have maybe not got on so well with their software vendor, and have then asked me to come in and help them identify a new piece of software. So develop a good, solid features and functionality matrix based on what we want from S1000D and where we think we're going with our information. So, and focus on the must-haves and not necessarily the nice-to-haves, because most of the software vendors or most of the tool providers will give us nice bells and whistles, but there's little things that I look for in a piece of software, given that I first thing I want to do is really understand the client and what they're trying to achieve, and then we can develop a matrix. But we can also look at the softer things that come with a good solid S1000D system. For example, can we store non-S1000D data? Can we apply metadata to it? Can we actually retrieve? Is that scalable? Is it something that can hold only a couple of hundred documents, or can we store thousands of documents? Are there workflow processes built into the software? Can we introduce other external non-tech pubs departments into our review and QA processes and our product definition processes? These kind of things are, if it's important to the organization, then they're the questions that we need to be asking our vendors. So features and functionality is where I would generally start after we've put aside pricing, put away and put aside that pricing. Technology and architecture is really important. You need to understand what technology and architecture is actually being used for your product, especially if you're buying something that's going to be installed and placed inside your organization. One thing, because I support lots of the vendor community, and if you're looking for a tool, check out the link down below. Those are the companies that support the work that we do here at TDW, and those are the companies that I am very comfortable saying to my clients that these are companies that I like to work with. So check those out. But we need to understand the architecture as well of the software that we're buying. So are there databases behind it? Is there any specific graphical viewing environments required? Does that imply, I'll talk about third-party licensing and that very shortly. Do we have to buy any specific hardware? Do we are we able to, from an IT perspective, what's our IT policies? Are we allowed to have open source in our organization, for example? There are many in the defense sector that is, the moment a piece of software is no longer formally supported by the supplier, it is therefore considered a security risk and it's removed from the network. They're no longer allowed to use it. So this is something that I've seen a lot. So really understand the architecture and the technology that's used, because some of the tools that are out there right now are still based on very, very old architecture and very, very old tools. And also, one thing that I do like to say, it's not so common in the S1000D market, but certainly in the DITA market when I'm working there, is are we actually taking the S1000D data and turning it into something that's proprietary? I work specifically with and for that software vendor, which may be fine if you're deciding that you're going to stay with that software vendor for the rest of your life. But the reality is that if they're doing something that's bespoke and works bespoke only to them, and I'm calling this out because I've supported a client in the DITA market where they went into a piece of software not realizing that they actually transposed the DITA data into something that was very specific and bespoke to their technology and their architecture. And then when the client said, oh, we actually want to move somewhere else, it was a very, very, very painful experience. So technology and architecture is very, very important, and we spend a lot of time asking the vendors for architecture diagrams, what software they rely on, what's the third-party pieces of software they rely on, is there any open source in there, those kind of things, and are they a reseller or are they a direct supplier of those pieces of technology is also quite key as well from a support perspective. So then I come on to the kind of the commercial side of things. How can the suppliers actually support you? Are they in your time zone? Do they work through third-party support agents? Have they got the capacity to support you if you're a large organization and you've got a team of 150, 200 technical authors? Can they actually support you? And also look at the license agreements. You really need to understand license agreements, and if there's third-party add-ons inside of technology, make sure that you understand those license agreements too. Make sure you understand what your publishing and distribution rights are and how you're allowed to use the software, how you're allowed to deploy any IETPs, how often have you got a named user license or have you got a floating user license is another kind of gotcha that many people don't realize. So some people will have, say, you can have 5 concurrent users at any one time using the software, but the moment you go over 5, you have to buy another seat or something along those lines. Really understand the license agreements and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and also understand the service level agreements. What's the escalation process? If you're having a problem with the software, how quickly will they be able to respond? I have seen clients that have almost lost 2 days production because of time zone differences and because a third-party reseller was not able to answer a question. Therefore it was sent back to the actual software vendors themselves, which is we're in a completely different time zone, and time is lost. And can we afford to lose these kind of times every time we have an issue that we are dealing with? And if you're dealing with a third party partner or reseller or something, that's fine, but make sure they understand the tools. Make sure they're not just what I call a box shifter. Make sure they really can support you, and they can really. I remember I was on a demonstration once where again, this was a DITA implementation where a third-party reseller partner for a piece of software came in, and there was not one question the guy couldn't answer. It was brilliant. Where, you know, I've been on a couple recently where the technical guys have come in and gave a presentation, and you know, we asked some simple questions and they didn't understand their software. So, you know, we just make sure that they are able to support and they understand the architecture, they understand the S1000D processes, and they can answer your questions, you know. So those are the first three. Now, the last one is I'm always asked my opinion on, you know, specific companies and individual companies. And you know, we work in a small market. We work in a small domain, and you know, we kind of all talk to each other and we kind of all know each other, and we have lots of frenemies. We have lots of people who talk nice to each other, but they're competitors, and you know, those kind of things. I do often get asked my opinion on individual organizations. What I try to do is I say, look, focus on the software and focus on the features and the functionality, and then once you're comfortable that that can actually work and you're happy that the licensing and the pricing, now we're talking pricing, and all that works for you, then you can move into the kind of final stages of workshopping software. You can get references and do site visits. And you know, one thing that I've noticed is that obviously if you ask for references, ask for a multitude of references. Don't just ask for 3, and then make sure that you know, randomly speak to some of them, because they will always put their best foot forward. And so in the main, I try to keep opinion to myself, and I focus purely on technical and the ability to support what individual customers need. So those are kind of the 4 things that we generally talk about. We can spend a whole day talking about software if we wanted to. You know, we've had conversations on my training courses which have then continued into the evening, where I've still been on site talking about software. One of the things that's going to change the dynamics of the S1000D market, and is changing the dynamics of the S1000D market, is the requirement to support the wider integrated product support domains. So, you know, we need to be thinking about our S1000D technical publications environment and how it's going to talk to other environments, S3000L, S2000M, 6000, all of these kind of input domains that are now coming into our S1000D environment. So those are kind of the main things I do. Now, again, remember, you can't do S1000D or integrated product support without the support of these vendors. These vendors make it happen. These technical specifications are complex enough without us having to go off and develop our own software solutions. So we're better off just buying a commercial off-the-shelf piece of software. I'm not going to talk in this particular tutorial about, you know, the number of times I've been taken into organizations where they've had a homegrown, semi-homegrown system, and the person that developed it has retired or left or won the lottery, or, you know, you can fill in the blank, and they're left with this system that is no longer supported. They don't know how it's held together. You know, you're better off just going to the open commercial market. And one thing I do say to the software vendors and the service vendors that I support is that you have to remember that when the customers that I'm supporting are suggesting internally that they need to go and invest X amount of dollars or euros or pounds on a piece of software, they're making career-changing decisions. If they go wrong and a company has invested quite a lot of money in a piece of software and it goes south and it goes wrong, then that can, and I've seen it change the trajectory of the actual individual that was involved. And so unfortunately sometimes I am brought in to firefight or help try and recover a situation. So I have developed a lot of checklists and spreadsheets and kind of things that I share with my customers when we're looking at specific tools and what we should be asking our vendors. So those are kind of the main things that I do. What is it you look for in an S1000D vendor or any kind of vendor. Do check out the link where you can go and see the companies that support the work that we do here at TDW. These are all great companies. Many of them give me software that I can, they like my opinion on their software. They like me to use their software and run it through the mill. So yeah, that's what I like to do. Those are the kind of 4 main areas. There's lots of things I could have added, obviously, but I'm not going to give you all of my trade secrets. But, you know, make sure you are really analysing what it is you need, what can be supplied, how you're allowed to use it, and is the company a company that you want to do business with? It's really simple, really. We've not talked about things like escrow and all that kind of stuff. That's for another day. That's for another tutorial. Until next week, have a good week. Stay safe, everyone. And let me know if you have enjoyed this tutorial. Many thanks to everybody who was sending me in emails and questions and comments, and really, really nice. You have pushed us into, I think it's May, June time now with tutorials. I want to get on to wider IPS topics, but you guys keep sending me S1000D questions. So, but until next week, have a good one. Hope you enjoyed it.